I'm Sandra Manco. I'm Vice President of the Sharon Historical Society Board of Directors, and I'm going to talk about bathhouses and treatments, which are both two topics very near and dear to the people who live here. This presentation describes the bathhouses in Sharon Springs and the various treatments which were made available for an extensive list of ailments. The Indians were the first to recognize the medicinal value of Sharon Springs waters. As early as the 17th century, marked Indian trails and paths led to the springs. The Mohawks gathered in large numbers and drank of and bathed in the health-giving waters. The village of Sharon Springs is situated in Schoharie County, about 1,100 feet above sea level. Springs of mineral waters gush forth from the hillside to merge with the waters of Brimstone Creek. Brimstone Creek rushes down to Sulphur Springs Creek Falls, and the waters continue to tumble through the ravine on the north side of the village, eventually merging with the Mohawk River. Later postcards refer to the falls as Ravine Falls, and the falls were also a tourist attraction, and many early postcards show people standing at the top of the falls. Recognizing the value of the waters, David Eldridge established a boarding house near the springs in 1825. Word quickly spread, and soon visitors were coming to the healing waters by canal boat from Albany to Palatine Bridge, and then they took a relatively short stagecoach ride to Sharon Springs. Sharon's success as a fashionable summer resort was ensured when the Utica and Schenectady Railroad was completed in 1836. Visitors could then travel to Palatine Bridge much faster than by canal boat. Soon other hotels, bathhouses, and businesses were built to serve the wealthy elite who had both the time and the money to enjoy the benefits of the mineral springs. The village of Sharon Springs gained international fame through the popularity of the mineral waters. The bathhouses and accommodations far surpassed anything to be found in Europe at that time. In this watering place, amid picturesque surroundings, visitors found relief from pain of arthritis, rheumatism, and many other ailments. Sulfur water was used both internally and externally. Some patients bathed in slate tubs with heated sulfur water for skin and arthritic conditions. Slate tubs were found to be especially desirable on account of their non-absorbent qualities. At the time, there was much debate over whether hot or warm mineral waters had more active medicinal agents than artificial hot water. It was proven that there was no perceptible difference between the therapeutic action of natural hot water and artificial hot water. Some patients drank the water for internal disorders, and inhaling fumes from sulfur water treated pulmonary disorders. The bathing facilities of Sharon Springs were compared to European methods being used in France and Germany at that time. Health spas were renowned as much for their picturesque surrounds as for their waters. Sharon Springs had the luxury of the highest quality of mineral waters and exceptionally beautiful grounds, bustling with activity, as well as the fresh mountain air. In the late 1880s, there were 3 bathhouses in existence: the White Sulphur Bathhouse, also known as the Lower Bathhouse, the Inhalation Bathhouse, and the Pine Needle Baths, which was also known as Fango Baths. Located near the north end of the village, Gardner's White Sulphur Bathhouse was destroyed by fire on September 6, 1875, when Congress Hall burned. A small bridge over Brimstone Creek provided a walkway to the temple. The brick bathhouse, which came later, was built on that site for the season of 1876. When the Lower Sulphur Bathhouse was built in 1876, it was said they were the best sulfur bathhouses in the United States. The most noted spring is the White Sulphur Springs, which owners claim to be not to be excelled by any sulfur spring in the country. The flow of water is approximately 96 gallons per minute with a temperature of 48 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It's clear and bright as it gushes from the spring. This image is hard to see, but there is a water tender in the Sulphur Temple by the Lower Bathhouse in 1873. He's holding a tray-like apparatus, and the device held drinking glasses and had a long vertical handle secured upright in the center of the tray. The whole apparatus was then lowered into the spring, and glasses of sparkling cold water could then be passed to the visitors at the temple. The new establishment consisted of an ornamental building with two entrances leading respectively into the ladies' and the gentlemen's waiting rooms. From here, doors opened into the bathhouses, two long buildings entirely separate from each other. The ladies' house contained 40 rooms, the gentlemen's 52. These are two more early views of the Lower Bathhouse. Visitors to the complex could enjoy a sulfur bath or take a drink of the sulfur water from the adjacent temple. Visitors who came to the lower baths and the Sulphur Temple around the turn of the century arrived in carriages and stepped down into a park-like complex. Years later, visitors were charged 5 cents at the admission booth to the temple, and there was a chain link fence later surrounding the temple. This postcard shows that the waters of Sharon Springs were awarded a diploma and a silver medal at the Paris Exposition in 1900 and at the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. And this was a huge honor. In 1927, Alfred Garner built the Beaux Arts style White Sulphur Temple, which replaced an earlier one. This elaborate classical and octagonal temple featured fluted columns topped by plaster Corinthian capitals, which supported an elaborate cornice decorated with brackets shaped like acanthus leaves and dentils. Music plays from the speakers set inside a chandeliered ceiling. Contained within the White Sulphur Temple is a sunken basin with low walls. Water was dipped out and poured into glasses for people to drink the powerful waters. Drinking or bathing in the waters claimed to afford substantial relief for rheumatic and gouty sufferers, as well as beneficial in stiff joints, gunshot wounds, and chronic poisoning. They were also serviceable in all cases of high living. So in other words, the waters could cure just about anything. A covered walkway was built over the magnesia spring behind the Lower Bathhouse building. Guests could sit on a bench and relax while taking in the aroma of the potent elixir. The temples were a place for social gatherings as well as a place to take the waters. Highly esteemed for drinking purposes, magnesia water contains minerals, especially beneficial for stomach disorders. The most unique of all of Sharon Springs temples is the elaborately ornamental domed magnesia temple. Henry J. Bang, who also owned the Fango Bathhouse and the Congress Hall complex, built the Renaissance Revival style temple in 1863 on the hillside above the Fango Bathhouse and was part of the Congress Hall complex. The Magnesia Temple had intricate ornamental detail with capitals and grapevine motifs throughout the structure. The exquisite detail of the Magnesia Temple interior is evident in this photograph and shows the stone steps that led to the fountain where refreshing and medicinal magnesia water once spouted from the mouths of twin stone lion heads. The tongue and groove wood ceiling was painted a beautiful azure blue, resembled a night sky scattered with golden stars. Magnesia water is beneficial for various problems of internal organs. In full doses, it acts as a laxative. When taken in smaller amounts, it's an effective antacid for stomach disorders. It's like taking an Alka-Seltzer. A roof structure sheltered the eye water spring. Although it's difficult to see in this photograph, there's a lion's head encased in the rock. The bluestone spring, or the eye water spring, was used extensively as a lotion for inflammatory conditions of the eye. And the water was also used as a facial splash. The Colebeate Temple was built later, around 1910, and Colebeate water contains iron and was used to treat anemia. Colebeate water had enough iron salts to turn one's teeth brown. Nevertheless, it was bottled and sold for its medicinal use. This is a crate that Colebeate water was bottled and shipped in under this Colebeate Spring Water Company label. This is another later view of the Colebeate Temple, and you can see the diving board of Smith's Pool in the background. Dr. Garner, who's son of John Garner, who owned the Pavilion Hotel, recognized the value of Sharon Springs' curative mineral waters. Wishing to expand on his father's empire as a fashionable health resort, Dr. Alfred Gardner traveled extensively in Europe studying hydrotherapeutic medicinal treatments. He returned to Sharon Springs and in 1888 built the Inhalation Bathhouse, which was constructed to utilize the most modern European methods. The Inhalation Bathhouse on Main Street is right next to the current Imperial Bathhouse. The most approved European methods of using sulfur water were first introduced in the United States at Sharon Springs. The two-story brick Inhalation Bathhouse adapted to these methods and was opened to the public in 1888. The stickwork in the gables added to its architectural charm. Its interior contained the reception area and rooms for inhalation, douches, Naudime baths, massage, and full steam sulfur treatment. Naudime baths are when chemical pellets were added to the water, causing a carbonated effervescent action, and were prescribed for those suffering from chronic heart disease. The direct inhalation room was located in the Inhalation Bathhouse building on Main Street, and the inhalation of sulfur water was considered most beneficial and curative for nasal catarrh and diseases of the respiratory organ. Sulfur water alone or combined with pine needle extract promise great relief in many cases of subacute and chronic pharyngitis, laryngitis, hay fever, and asthma. Note the spittoons by the side of each chair. In the pulverization treatment method, water atomized by steam or compressed air was forced through pipes into the rooms and breathed into the lungs. Pulverization rooms were very warm and scented with pine. Ferns planted around the fountain flourished in the hot, humid air. This is another view of the pulverization room where lung patients were treated. The pine needle and sulfur magnesia baths, also known as the Schaefer baths, and they were sometimes called the Fango baths, straddled Brimstone Creek at the north end of Main Street, and it was built into a gully. Steps lead up the hill on both sides of the building. The Fango bathhouse consisted of two bathhouses, one for men, the other for women, 1 story high. Each house contained 35 single bathrooms, a large lounging room, massage rooms, a steam cabinet, and examination rooms. These rooms had high ceilings and were finished in hardwood. They boasted modern douche facilities and offered the famous Fango mud packs and massage treatments. Medical treatments in the late 1880s relied heavily on non-invasive methods. Surgery was not a common procedure. Doctors and their patients believed that anything smelling as foul and tasting as vile as the mineral waters had to be good for the patient. Physicians prescribed treatments for a wide variety of ailments, and an expert staff of technicians carried out their instructions. This is another view of Fango, which shows the setting and how the bathhouse was nestled between the trees and built on top of a creek. If you're not familiar where this is, if you're traveling south on Route 10, at the top of the Dugway before you come into the village, you look to the right into the ravine, and that's where the Fango bathhouse was located. It doesn't look like there's enough room, but it was a large building. This is another view showing the picturesque surrounds. This image is not from Sharon. I don't have any photos of this type of an early steam bath treatment given at Fango bathhouse, but I envision it was similar to this. Colonic irrigations with natural magnesia water were offered for gallbladder ailments and for stubborn cases of constipation. This is a small dresser dish, which was an early souvenir depicting the Fango bathhouse. The Garner Pine Needle Extract Company offered pine needle extract for baths, pine needle oil, pine needle spirit, pine needle soap, and pine needle embrocation. This potent remedy was a cure-all for a multitude of ailments and was available in a half gallon for $3.75 or a gallon bottle for $7. And at this price, who could afford to be without it? And I had to look up embrocation because I wasn't sure what it was, but it's a liquid that you rub on the body to relieve pain from sprains or strains. And the pine is a symbol of purification and cleansing. This view gives you a better idea of the location of the Fango bathhouse. It shows the plane factory directly behind the Fango bathhouse, and up to the right is Congress Hall Park and the famous Magnesia Temple. In the far background at the left, you can see the Congress Hall Hotel, and the Congress Hall Hotel sits approximately where the Imperial Bathhouse sits today. And the plane factory made wood planes for carpentry. They weren't airplanes. This is yet another view of the Fango bathhouse and its surroundings. This very early image shows Congress Hall in the background, which burned in 1875. One of the early treatments was the famous Fango packs, and as this brochure indicates, thousands who suffered for many years found long-sought relief after just a few weeks of Fango pack treatments. Fango treatments were administered at hospitals and sanatoriums in Tel Aviv, Poland, Italy, Belgium, France, Germany, just to name a few, and of course at Sharon Springs, New York. Arthritic patients sat in a chair to receive the hot mud pack treatments. Pictured here is a photo from 1939 of Jeanette Lehman McBride receiving a mud pack treatment administered by Roger Ingram. These treatments stopped when the mud was no longer available from Europe due to World War II. As the demand for mineral water therapy grew, additional bathhouses were needed to cater to the needs of the visiting public. A map dated 1904 shows the bathhouse annex added to the Park Hotel, or the Sanatorium Hotel as it was called at that time. This shows the huge addition on the back of the Park Hotel. It took up an entire block. In 1930, the arcade was added to the lower bathhouse. Cobblestone piers support the arches and polychrome slate covers the roof. There was once a sign on Main Street with a big finger pointing to the White Sulphur and Magnesia Springs. And this is an example of two different mugs which were sold as souvenirs. And these mugs are very collectible today. The inhalation bathhouse was also modernized. Wooden wings were added after 1939. Then in 1927, the completed Imperial Bathhouse offered many of the treatments provided by the older establishments. Owners boasted that there were accommodations for 5,000 treatments daily. The structure is a stuccoed frame building with double Corinthian columns that support the Beaux Arts style entrance arcade. This advertisement is to announce the grand opening of the Imperial Bathhouse in 1927. This is another early view of the Imperial Bathhouse. This view is from around the 1939 or the 1930s. The Imperial Bathhouse was a busy place. The largest of the 5 immaculate bathhouses at the Mountain Spa is the Imperial. Visitors made appointments at the reception room for Nautheim and sulfur baths, douches, irrigations, inhalations, massages, and packs. It advertised all the benefits of the distant European spas, approximately 178 miles from New York. And spa addicts gathered here from around the world to be treated for arthritis, rheumatic conditions, infantile paralysis, neuritis, cardiac disease, colitis, gallbladder, kidney and stomach troubles, bronchitis, hay fever, catarrh, skin troubles, nervous ailments. If you had a problem, it could be cured in Sharon Springs. A light above each bathing and resting room door at the Imperial Baths indicated the patient wanted assistance. Treatment facilities within Imperial Baths had separate wings for men and women. The beauty and uniqueness of the interior wainscoting shows in this photo. There were 150 wainscoted bathing and resting rooms covering 150,000 square feet of floor space in the Imperial Bathhouse. This is the women's section, and it advertised the spick and span corridor of the women's section welcomes its guests. This shows a bathtub at the Imperial Bathhouse. And this is shows an empty tub and a bath waiting for a patient. This was a sign posted in one of the bathhouses, which reads, "Use of this resting room is limited to 20 minutes. Sulfur treatments were very tiring. After a bath, the patient went to a resting room and many times fell asleep." And this is a typical treatment room at the Imperial Bathhouse. Another view of the treatment room shows a bathtub and a resting room. While medical advances have been made in recent years, there are still many who believe firmly in the mineral water's curative powers. The direct inhalation room is where patients receive treatments for throat and lung disorders. This 1939 photo shows a demonstration of the direct inhalation method. Breathing vapor through the glass cone delivered the sulfur directly to the throat and lungs. This publicity photo of 1939 shows a patient resting in sulfur water bath while catching up on the news. This image is a sign posted which reads, "Please pull the plug immediately upon leaving the tub." I figured this was so they didn't have to scrub the ring around the tub. This 1939 photograph, Dr. Leland White and an attendant are giving a patient a sulfur steam bath. Dr. White was a leading physician in Sharon from 1901 until the 1940s. He died in 1954. The bathing quarters provided the patient a massage table and a bathtub. Sulfur baths with massage were considered very beneficial in the treatment of a whole spectrum of physical disorders. Massages, full body, and localized for circumscribed painful areas were given as a circulatory stimulant for their excellent relaxing effects. This photo shows how an invalid could be lowered into the sulfur water with a series of ropes and pulleys. This shows two different posters with prices for various treatments at the Adler baths and also the Annex baths. These are two different years, so they aren't really a comparison. And I imagine they all had the same prices each year. This is an example of these tickets are good for 6 sulfur baths. The Scotch douche was another treatment offered at the Imperial Bathhouse, and the Scotch douche was an invigorating water massage applied selectively or to the whole body to stimulate circulation or to massage symptomatic areas. This patient is unidentified unless somebody claims to know him. This patient came in with his crutches, but after taking the baths, he could throw his crutches away. And this man is taking a sulfur bath and drinking sulfur water at the same time. A later view of the Imperial, it's still a very busy place, and this is in the 1950s. Yet another view of the Imperial, and this is probably around the 1950s. A year after the Imperial opened, the Hotel Adler opened in 1928 with mineral baths accommodations on the lower level for its guests. It provided board and lodging as well as its own bathing facilities. The glass brick in the immaculate bathing room at the Adler Hotel was a very modernistic feature. The receptionist was available at the lower level of the Adler and ready to receive guests for the new bathing facilities. In the 1930s, the Pavilion Hotel converted its billiard hall and bowling alley to a bathhouse for pavilion guests for the convenience of its patients and for the overflow of guests. The decorative trim in the gables and the stickwork porch rail gave the building its charm. During the 1960s and 70s, the building was used as a recreation center for children. And unfortunately, this building was burned by arsonists on May 23rd, 1999. This brochure reads, "There's a song of health at Sharon Springs." The imported pine needle extract improved your health, it soothed your nerves, it cleared your skin. It advertised by the white sulfur baths of Sharon Springs, who claimed once you try it, you will always buy it. Not only did the mineral baths heal patients of numerous ailments, they claimed to miraculously transform the body as well. And this portly visitor certainly received a favorable result. Bathers who took advantage of Sharon Springs' healing waters left their crutches behind, as this 1907 postcard illustrates. Note the attendants are wearing goggles. After long hours of exposure to the strong vapors, they sometimes cause what was called sulfur eyes. The eyes became inflamed and watery, and often the attendants required medication. This is another example of a promotion of the baths. The lower bathhouse was in serious disrepair when this photo was taken, and this was one of the unique doors in the lower bathhouse. And I believe this door came from the Fango baths when it was torn down. The primary purpose for guests coming to Sharon Springs in the early 20th century was to take advantage of the benefits of the mineral waters. However, guests and their families soon found they had a great deal of time on their hands because treatments only engaged a small portion of their day. As fame of Sharon Springs spread, recreation activities and entertainment became crucial to attracting and keeping happy, contented guests. Some of the more trendy souvenirs were dresser dishes, mugs, thermometers, plates, and with pictures of spas and temples, and of course, postcards. One of the more popular tokens of remembrance for their outing was the cobalt blue souvenir dishes. These small mementos from Sharon Springs came in many shapes and sizes, such as small pitchers, pin trays, dresser dishes, miniature vases, and maybe a tea set. The souvenir pieces typically had an image of the Pavilion Hotel, the Magnesia Temple, or the lower bathhouse, the more exquisite of Sharon's establishments of this time period. Visitors from the Victorian era seldom returned home empty-handed from their tours. Another popular souvenir was Mauchline ware, so named because it was manufactured in and around the village of Mauchline in Ayrshire, Scotland. Mauchline ware is an ochre-colored wood often decorated with scenes of tourist sites. It was generally made of sycamore wood, which has a very close grain. The pale color made it an excellent background for the colored paints and pen and ink work. Some of the more popular souvenir pieces of the time included matchboxes, bookmarks, playing card containers, stamp boxes, letter openers, egg cups, pin cushions, cosmetic boxes designed for face powder, and occasionally jewelry. The images here on this are on the pieces include the inhalation bathhouse, the Magnesia Temple, and the lower bathhouse, all trendy pieces of this time period. Boardwalks and parks no longer bustle with ladies in silk and satin. Gentlemen no longer greet each other with a tipped hat. Most old hotels and boarding houses were burned down or have fallen down. We still smell the sulfur in the air. We look back with a longing to those gentler times, but we look for a brighter future for our beloved little village. And I'll be glad to take any questions.
We
Yeah,
have some
Jen.
questions.
The ad said something, the pine extract was imported. Where was it brought from?
You gotta ask me a question I don't know the answer
That was
to.
from the Black Forest of Germany.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
They imported that over from Germany.
Why couldn't that be made here?
I guess there was something unique about the pines in the Black Forest in Germany. So I remember when I did mine, that's where
Yeah.
it referenced. Let's see that we got some questions.
I think the mud came from that area too.
Weren't the bathtubs in the Imperial bath made of lead? I recall we're doing irrigations at the bath Imperial in the 70s and 80s. Is that true?
Yes, they were doing baths during the 70s and 80s. Actually, they did baths right up until 2004, I believe. The early baths, I think, were slate baths, but I'm sure that there were more than just slate. Do you know, Pauline? Oh. I don't know. That's very light.
Yeah, I think that has to be slate. Yeah. Yeah. What is the future of the Imperial Baths? I see they resumed starting to work on it again. Who wants to take that one?
Well, rumor has it that they fixed it up and plan to possibly put it up for sale, but I don't know if that's true or not. And they're talking about renovating the inhalation bathhouse, which is the brick bathhouse to the right of the Imperial. That hasn't started. If it does start, I'll have Ron answer that.
Well, their plan right now is to make the inhalation building into a 17-room lodging facility with a new spa downstairs, not using the existing spa, but to build a brand new one in that location. The problem is that it's in a flood zone, and they want to build it right in the flood zone, which they're claiming they have historic exemption just because it's on the National Register. They should get a historic exemption, but there's no historic exemption when it comes to health and safety. And so it's going to be coming to the planning board. As a matter of fact, I just got the drawings and the paperwork today. So it's going to, at some point, come to the planning board, but we're waiting for the attorneys to resolve the issue with the flood zone. And on the left side of the Imperial Baths, they purchased what was one time a hardware store. And then later the dance studio, they want to make that into a Korean barbecue. But they presented a lot of different plans. And as you can see, as Sandy mentioned, they painted up the front of the bathhouse, but they did a lot of work on it. It was built on whiskey barrels filled with concrete, and over time it sunk into the ground. They had to stabilize that. So they did spend a lot of money on it. And the problem with that is that they lost their funding that they had. So that project is at a standstill. So it's really questionable whether the bathhouse will resume. And as Sandy had indicated, well, I talked to Mr. Cho himself, and he told me he was putting it up for sale. So
I wanted to add on that too. The Imperial Bathhouse, the plans they had for it, I mean, you could see the beautiful wainscoting of the interior. They've gutted that whole building. All the resting rooms and the bathrooms. When I say a bathroom, I don't mean a bathroom like we think of a bathroom. It's a bathing room. They've gutted all that. The inside is just a big open space. They weren't going to have, what was in there were European style baths, which means it was an individual bath and a resting room. They were planning to have Asian style baths, which means it's more group bathing. They planned on having like gazebos out back, and they were damming up part of the creek to make like well, group bathing in the creek as well. So the bathhouse as we knew it is gone because they gutted it. It's gone.
And it's interesting, the Adler Hotel is for sale, and I'm getting a number of calls on that. And they keep thinking that because there was a bathhouse there, and as Sandy indicated, there was a spa in the basement. All of that water for the Adler and the Pavilion bathhouses was pumped over. So that means pipes had to be run under Route 10 and go over to the property at the bathhouse. Today, those pipes are all, shot. Yeah. And they would have to, replace all of that at a huge expense, and not even sure whether it could be done because, first of all, you'd have to go under Route 10 and put the pipes under, a freeway or a state road. And second of all, it's a different owner, and he would definitely, the water has to be pumped. So it's not like you can just run a hose to the creek. It's not coming from the creek. It's coming from a what do you call them? Where the water comes out. It's it's just blowing. It's like a reservoir. And so they would have to put their hose into the reservoir and then pump that out. And of course, if he plans to use it, he's not going to want all of his water pumped up the hill, especially if he's getting nothing for it, So some challenges with that. And the fact that some people don't understand the difference between, and Sandy alluded to this at the beginning, they think we have hot water springs here. There are not hot water springs, they're mineral springs. And as she said, it's 48 degrees. It's not a hot water like you'd see in hot water or hot Springs, Arkansas, where the water steams. It's not that kind of spa.
And I think they own the rights to the water, so people can't use the water. They'd have to pay for that.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see where that goes. Were any of those treatment buildings set aside for those having tuberculosis?
I never heard of anyone treated here for tuberculosis. No, I don't think so.
Was there an abundance of medical staff running all of those buildings? Well, the doctors, many of the hotels had doctors on
Yeah,
staff.
the doctors would come up here in the summer. They would, sometimes they'd have doctor's offices, I think, in the hotels.
Mhm.
They would have their own doctor's offices, many of them. The doctors would prescribe what the patient needed and give the orders to the bathhouse so they would know what treatments to give.
The Union Hotel right next to the spa had a doctor on staff.
Mhm.
Yep. Let's see here.
And just as the doctors would come here for the summers, so did a lot of the help. People who lived in Sharon, well, like for example, people who worked at the school, some of the teachers, they would give massages in the summer. And most every family here either had someone who worked in a hotel or would clean or wait tables or work in a laundry and that was probably true of all the surrounding communities as well. They either worked here or knew of someone who did.
Are there any other questions that are
I
Uh,
have one.
yes,
I didn't join the family until 58, and so I missed all this, going on. But in the pictures you show, people, the women are dressed up and the guys are dressed up with their hats on and everything else. My experience coming into Sharon Springs with my mother-in-law when I brought her to St. Mary's Church was that it was Jewish people with their long black coats and their high hats, and the women were all bundled up in their clothes too. And I thought springs were just for them.
No,
can you repeat the
Yeah.
question because people online can't hear?
she's asking, the pictures that we show mostly like Victorian dress with hats and satin dresses. And yet, later years, it was a Jewish resort. When people originally started coming here in I'll say the late 1880s, 90s, it was the Victorian and wealthy elite. And it was before transportation was by car. And they went on summer circuits, and they would come and stay for a month or two at the hotels. Later, around the turn of the century, well, in the early 1900s, when transportation was made available by car and they could easily get from one place to the other, that's when they started building their own places, like in the Adirondacks and in Newport, Rhode Island. And they would build their own cottages because they could travel there easily. And it was about this time that the resort gradually started changing over to a Jewish resort. And then after World War II, many of the doctors, they prescribed, they had reparations with Germany, that they prescribed treatments for people who were in concentration camps, and they came here. And I think there were a couple of different kinds of Jews over the years.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Germans sent the Jewish people here to be rehabilitated. Depending on the severity of the treatment in the concentration camps, they were given this remuneration for, and it could be used for food, lodging, and treatments at the bathhouses. So they would, and many of the other spa towns would not take them. Saratoga Springs, many of the other New York spas would not take the Jewish people, because that was at the time where there was anti-Semitic people were against the Jewish people, so they didn't want them. And the Sharon Springs said, "We'll take them." And so it became a huge Jewish community. We first had the Hasidic Jewish people that came, and then later we had the Sitmars that came. The difference between the two, obviously, there's the dress, there's a difference between the way they dress. But the other thing is the Hasidics would trade more with the locals and use the store or visit the stores and shop, and so they were very helpful to the economy. When the Sitmars came, they would only deal with their own people, so they became like at the Central Hotel next door. That they had their own grocery store, so they would oftentimes bring their supplies from the city with them. Yeah, so it became, and at one time they claimed, we had over 10,000 people. And even today, people, well, and some of you probably, I don't know, have heard stories that if you didn't get up by 5 o'clock in the morning and get the garbage, to do the garbage men that had to go through the street, you couldn't get through the street because it was just wall to wall Hasidics, or the people in the black robes and the curls, and then gradually that ended because it died out, and the people who lived in came here and owned the hotels. The older the people they died off. Their kids didn't want to come anymore. There were a lot of hotels that were owned by Jewish people, and over time they didn't care for them, and they started to go into disrepair. I actually had a conversation 2 nights ago with a lady whose family had a Jewish boarding house. Same thing, you know, it was the father or the grandfather died. He gave it to one of the uncles. He never came up here, went into, you know, deterioration, and the rest of the family found out later when they came out that, you know, the house had been torn down and they were just devastated. But that kind of thing happens, or they burned down. You know, Sandy could tell you all about that.
They either burned down or fell down, and they couldn't pay the taxes on them, or they couldn't make enough money on the hotels and the boarding houses to pay the taxes because the season was very short. It was basically 2 months out of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the people in our audience, John Duda, lives in Fleischman's, which is another Jewish resort. Do you have anything you can add, John?
I was just gonna act, you know, it's exactly what we've been dealing with. But it's the same thing, that why this one town became a Jewish resort. And in your case, obviously Saratoga made a choice not to, but Sharon said, come on up.
I think Jewish people were made to feel welcome here,
Same
and,
thing in Fleischman's, that
and we wish they were still here.
because they were welcomed.
Did you have a question, Elmer?
Has the quality of the sulfur water changed since
I don't
the
think so.
earlier days, or, you know?
I think that when Mr. Doe, he was the gentleman who owned it before Mr. Cho. When I think he had an analysis done of the water and compared it to what was on record, and I think it was identical. That was, I say, that could have been 15, 20 years ago. So I don't believe it's changed.
Well, I believe that
I don't-
anytime you drive by it, it's the same smell. It hasn't changed.
I don't think the smell is as strong as it used to be.
No, it's not.
But
After
when
it
they were
rains-
digging in the creek, when they were, a couple years ago, when they were digging and everything was riled up, you could smell it then.
And the issue with the sulfur water is, you know, you say, has it changed? And one of the questions we get is, people remember coming up here a lot and you could go access it, and they said, can we still access the springs? Well, when the Koreans bought it, they closed it all off, and there is still like the magnesia, there's still Magnesia Springs, but it's privately owned, so you can't get up there to use it. And the Koreans were told when they bought this, because it was public water, that as part of this project, they had to provide public access. So we had a conversation with them about piping water over to the museum, because we just put in a new lion head fountain over there. And we thought, wouldn't that be great at the museum to have sulfur water pumped into this lion head fountain? But they don't have the money to do it, and they never follow through with what they say. So I don't think it's going to happen. But
How did they differentiate between the sulfur water, the magnesium water, and then the other one you said?
Oh, they
It's
all
like
come
rust.
from a different place. The behind where the lower bathhouse is, on that hillside, there's 3 different places where the eye water, the magnesia water, and the sulfur water come out in different places. The chalybeate water comes out kind of across from the American. So they're different places, and the water still runs. They aren't capped. The chalybeate water is capped off, but the others I don't believe are. I think they just run down into the creek.
We had sulfur on the farm drilling back in the 50s, and had it piped into the house for a while. When the pipes started corroding, my mom says, get it out of here.
You
Well-
didn't give Baz, in other words.
there is a nursery down at the bottom of the hill, and they were hoping that they could pump from that spring in order to water their plants, but there was too much sulfur or salt in the water, and it killed their plants. And so it does travel down into Brimstone Creek, which is actually goes from my property over here and goes all the way down.
And I heard a rumor that the Collegiate Temple a house was built around it.
Yeah,
was
Carolyn's
closed in.
question was a house built around Collegiate Temple. I showed you pictures of when with the columns. And yes, when the Burmans were there in the 1950s, they had, yeah, they had little boarding houses. They had, well, a taxi service. They had like an ice cream shop or restaurant. And they made an apartment in there. They closed in the sides and they lived in there in the summer.
I thought a rabbi lived in there at one time.
Oh, could be.
Yeah, because he blessed, that's the rabbi that blessed the, the meats and stuff over there down in the park. And it was a little place down there where he would bless the meats. But I just today pulled up Berman's Little Village and saw or had pictures of what it looks like. And I have that all filled in. I'll email it to you, but I have a picture of the Collegiate Temple all closed in as a little apartment.
That was an adorable little complex there. It's too bad it was torn down.
Yeah, it was very Victorian, real cute looking, had a nice little Victorian porch on the front.
Any other questions?
Are there?
Thank you so much. I really.
Oh, yep, there's a question. Hold on. Wait, let's see. When the Adler stopped having dinners and entertainment, when did it? Oh, gosh, it closed in 2006.
Do you know, Barb?
I was gonna say in the 90s, I think we used to go to shows there or something.
Yes, in the 90s. But I think it operated until 2006.
No, because
No?
the bathhouse closed around 2004. I
Okay.
don't think the Adler was open then, was it?
Okay,
I think it was earlier than that.
yeah. Yeah, and they had great entertainment and they had staff night and the employees all got up and performed and it was really,
There was a group of us used to try to go to the Adler once for dinner before they closed, and it was good.
I did go for a show. I took my grandson, a magician.
well, we want to thank everyone for coming and our next program will be in 2 weeks, and that's a Zoom only program. That program is on the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II. And when we do these programs, we try to offer a variety of some local historical background, as well as some international historic figures. And so this one will be on Queen Elizabeth II. For anybody that's still online, we had an interesting thing. We purchased the property beside the museum, and it was the Gans house. And they had a paranormal activity assessment there last night, and it was a very interesting. The night before, they had one at Hyde Hall, and the people that were doing the paranormal thing said there was more activity at the Gans house than there was at Hyde Hall. Yeah, and they actually, from what I understand, and Michelle was there, but I only stayed 3 hours. It went 6 hours, and they filmed it and they recorded, and so they're supposedly going to do a presentation on their finding, but they found between 6 and 10 individuals, apparently women and a couple children, and they were in various parts of the house. And upstairs there was an older man, and supposedly they got recordings of the people talking. So it'll be interesting to, I don't know when that's going to be. About 2 weeks is what he said he'd come back with the presentation. And these are people that do this from Orange County, and they do these paranormal activity investigations all over. But they did come. We thought it'd be kind of interesting since this was an old building, and so we had them come and do that. But we did ask them to do a presentation to our group as a paranormal thing so we will have that coming up in the future, and I think you'll enjoy
And
it.
tell everyone, Ron, you hear this, will you be a believer then?
No, I won't, because they've been trying, just so you know, I own the Roseboro Hotel, and they've been trying for years to get me to, admit that there's ghosts there. And I live there, and I can tell you that there's no ghosts, but the people that had it before me swear that there were ghosts in there.
Have you had
And-
people come in with their equipment?
No, but you have to believe in that stuff before it starts. I'll hear, if I believed in it, I'd hear it, but I don't believe in it, so I don't hear it. So comment says, thank you, beautiful village. We visited the Springs to go to the Beekman 1802, such incredible history in Sharon Springs. There sure is. And we enjoy sharing it. So thank you all, and hopefully you'll join us for another one of our programs.